All right, so what is your name and how are you qualified to address questions regarding whistleblower cop Chris Dorner?
I'm going to call myself Officer X. I want to say that I have, in this region, been the most talked about police officer in reference to whistleblowing in the probably history of the United States. I have had numerous issues where, because of my moral standing in God, that I decided to not cover the truth. In fact, these are the very things that we're actually hired to do as police officers, to tell the truth. We're sworn to do that. And I've got a dubious position, but when I came to police work, you see I hold a badge. But when I came into law enforcement, I actually was a minister. I'd been a minister for 18 years. So I couldn't very well abandon my system of rightness because of a 10 badge, even though I stood to hold the principles of law enforcement.
So what are your views on Chris Dorner?
I believe Chris Dorner is a guy that told the truth. I believe he was the least one that was needed in the police department in reference to the hierarchy. I believe that he was the scapegoat, he was the fall guy. And truthfully, what he said could have been dealt with maybe in a different way. But I think that Chris was determined to try to make a change. I don't think it was just about that one incident that he was involved in. I believe Chris was trying to change LAPD and make life better for people who were minorities.
Oh, okay. In general, are police agencies sensitive to complaints of cops or cops who report on cops?
When internal affairs gets involved in a complaint on a police officer, you got to understand that it's like the foxes patrolling the foxes in reference to the hen house. These are guys that have known each other for a long time. They watch each other's back. They've done family things with each other. And you put them in a situation where they've got to report on one of their close friends. That's a bad position to be in. That's why I support a civilian oversight committee. But I think the civilian oversight committee ought to be people who've had to ride with the police officers so they don't strap the police officers' hands when it comes to being as tough as they need to be. You don't need bleeding hearts riding around with police officers.
Okay, good point, good point. So why do you think Chris Dorner chose to act as he did versus going to court to sue under the federal whistleblower law?
The whistleblower law was changed during the Bush administration, and it basically stripped all of the protection around a whistleblower cop. The only thing that can be blown and backed up is or revealed that's done wrong is something that is hurting the government monetarily. If it's not hurting the government monetarily, if you go back and take a look at the whistleblower law now, they're not interested in it. And that's sad. I mean, they're not interested in what happens to people. They're interested in how somebody who's an employee does something that hurts the government financially, then they're interested in it.
Okay. So do you think the LAPD was trying to cover up and protect a fellow officer whom they like and punish Dorner for crossing the blue line of silence?
Absolutely, without the shadow of a doubt. In fact, it's not an uncommon thing. It's a prevalent thing. It's almost as common as police work itself. I mean, put yourself in a position. If you have developed a close friendship, keep in mind, police officers get out every day and they fight bad guys. They fight people. They're in situations where one doesn't watch the other one's back. That they may not go home at night. And after years of this type of alliance, you mean that you want one of them to report when another one does something which is crossing the line of right and wrong, but it's minuscule by comparison to the good that this guy has done or this woman has done. That's why I say there needs to be an oversight committee that's neutral, but it's not not a bleeding heart organization, neither is it anti-police.
Okay. What other types of punishment are cops who blow the whistle subject to?
Well, let's start with death. Death is one of the things. It's not unknown that cops will get set up. They may set him up with a crow call, and he goes on a call at night and gets shot. They may decide to just simply not promote him. Um, they may decide to ostracize him. They may decide to have people to file frivolous complaints against him. So they may give him the worst equipment. May not even allow him to get the continuing training that he wants to receive because he's not one of the favored ones. And believe me, I know all of that quite well.
Okay. So should the LA community insist that the case and other cases like it be reviewed?
Absolutely. The LA community needs to insist that it be reviewed. In fact, it needs to go further than that. The churches, the spiritual leaders, the mosques, the halls, the temples, the synagogues, everybody that is about righteousness needs to get involved. But they don't need to get involved with a bleeding heart. I'm going to attack the police department, and I'm going to do everything we can to cripple the hands of the police. It doesn't need to be done with that because police officers need authority. They're the last line of defense. The bad guys don't have an oversight committee that's a bleeding heart against them. So, but truth needs to come. Justice needs to come. And again, I stand on the principle that this book and many other books supersede any law, any practice, any procedure, any line, whether it's blue or whatever. I think that we should do unto others as we would have them to do unto us. There's no substitution.
Now you say bleeding heart a lot. What do you mean by bleeding heart?
Well, there are people who feel that the police should be weak in their law enforcement. You can't afford that. You can't be weak. You've got to be strong. You've got to be strong up to the point and including even using deadly force. But it needs to be done when and where necessary. You can't just arbitrarily beat a person because you've got the authority to do so. The Rodney King type of beatings should never be done. There's no justification. There was a bunch of cops there. We have taser guns now that prohibit the need for a person to be beat with a nightstick unnecessarily. So what I'm saying is that every person that's dealt with by the police, whenever possible, should be dealt with like they are the son or the daughter of the police commissioner, or the son or the daughter of the mayor, or the son or the daughter of the captain. If the captains knew that it was their child, or the police commissioner, or the mayor, they would have no problems investigating any complaint about abuse and let their child come home, or their mother, their daughter come home bruised and beaten up with another officer saying that he saw it. Then it would be a different thing. I'm saying let's be fair to all. That's all that I'm saying, and that's what I think godliness and righteousness is all about.
Okay. So what would you like to see done to protect whistleblowing employees, whether government or privately employed?
I think whistleblower employees ought to have the right to sue to say a maximum of maybe $5 or $10 million. You know, frivolous suits that go into the hundreds of millions I don't think are necessary. But you got to keep in mind, when a person comes to the forefront and becomes a whistleblower, they many times are sacrificing not only safety, not only peace of mind, but this is their career. Dorner probably didn't have another career to fall back on. So you're putting this guy, not only did they strip him of his gun and his weapon, they stripped him of his authority, but they have also ostracized him. And now, where does he work? He'll never get a job. When they call back to the LAPD for a reference, the friends of that person that they protected, if this was the case, would not give a good reference to Dorner. So I'm saying that the whistleblower really needs to be protected. If you want righteousness to come up, you must stand by that person who he is all that he's got plus the law when he takes that stand. Now, I don't know whether Dorner had some post-traumatic stress as a result of law enforcement or post-traumatic stress as a result of the military, but I know he had a stress in reference to what he was going through. Do I justify what he did? No. He took the law in his hands, and the consequences of what he did seem to be appropriate. But I'm saying to you that there needs to be an oversight committee checking into these complaints, because keeping the cops who would come forth afraid to do so because there's no protection for doing so.
Okay. So in general, what are your views about law enforcement and the men and women who wear the uniform?
I think they're among the most unselfish people in the world. You have no idea how many times in the course of a day a cop actually does risk not coming home, whether it's from just a traffic stop where a vehicle misses him by 2 feet, or whether it's rushing in to protect somebody that's mentally off. It's just endless. The times that they go into the dark, into buildings, into fire areas where there's fires. I mean, and then they come out, and if they make a simple mistake in a fraction of a second, they have to make critical life altering decisions. If they make a critical mistake, then they're sued or they're fired. So my hat goes off to this honorable profession. I'm saying that we need to make it better. We don't need to let the few, and I want to say this, in my 22 years of experience, I have found that about 85% of our cops are good. But that 15% goes after power and seizes it as ruthlessly as they can. And because of the chain of command, that person on the bottom cannot get up to the higher echelons, because in many cases, if they break the chain of command, they're suspended or an action is taken against them. So therefore, truth and justice gets sequestered down up under a chain of command. That's just like a slavery chain, in my opinion.
Okay. All right, Officer X, we appreciate this interview, and I'm sure our fans will appreciate it as well.